Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. On this episode, what happened to Guitar Center? Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining me. On this episode, we're going to do the first of hopefully many episodes of a series I like to call What Happened To. And I couldn't think of a better company to discuss than Guitar Center. And I mean from the perspective of what happened to, not in a positive sense, but more in a what happened? Like for a company that had it going at one time, how could they have fallen so far? Now, unless you have not been watching YouTube or looking at social media, guitar stuff at all, you may have missed the interview with the newly installed Guitar Center CEO. This interview has stirred up some conversation, as Guitar Center talk always does. For me, honestly, and I can link that article down below, the Guitar World article is actually referencing a much bigger article. But honestly, even that article itself feels to me like a puff piece. This is where the CEO gets to talk about his upbringing, his history with Guitar Center. He was actually on the board before he became a CEO, so he's actually been involved with the company for the last couple of years, like through COVID, which isn't particularly inspiring. But he makes a couple of statements. One statement is referring to the abundance of $300 guitars in the Guitar Center. Another one being that the Guitar Center should be a playground for guitars, and the other one being that their web presence is terrible. Again, I think most people would agree with most of those points, especially the web presence one. It is atrocious how a company of that size completely has ignored the internet up until recently, frankly. So what happened here? I mean, like at one point, Guitar Center was the place to go. It was on its way, in many ways, becoming a Walmart of guitars, which I think may also explain maybe some of its lack of interest or some of its downfall. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Guitar Center. When I was growing up, we didn't have a Guitar Center here in Tulsa until the early 2000s, and I was already in my early 20s. So when I bought my first guitar, it was from a mom and pop store. Unfortunately for them, within a mile of the Guitar Center. I had a friend who went to California. This is maybe a couple of years before we had the Guitar Center brought here to Tulsa. And he came back telling me about Guitar Center. And funny enough, the CEO mentioning the playground analogy really made me think of this story, because that's what my friend also told me. It was like a playground for guitars. There's guitars everywhere. You can pick them up and try them, and there's amps and pedals. And it's just like, he just made it seem like it was just everywhere, an abundance of guitars. And in many ways, he was right. Compared to how we shop for guitars as kids pre-Guitar Center, if most of you, by the way, I know are old enough to remember, if you were playing guitar in the 90s, 80s, before that, what it was like buying a guitar if you didn't have a Guitar Center in your town. For most of us, it was going to a small mom and pop, asking about a guitar, them handing you a guitar, maybe an effects pedal, them hooking it up, and them either sitting back at their desk or eyeing you from the counter as you nervously picked up, knowing that there are eyes in the back of your head as you nervously play and try not to scuff or scratch or do anything to any of the equipment, because God help you, you are broke as can be. You shouldn't even be trying this equipment, and they kind of know it and you kind of know it. So there's this whole uncomfortableness. And to be fair to that small business owner, it's their money. This is a guitar that they would like to get as much money for. And the more wear and tear on that guitar obviously is going to come with a discount, because no one's going to want to pay full retail for a floor model, essentially, which kind of gets into the bigger problem with Guitar Center. So when Guitar Center came to Tulsa, it was able to wedge itself into a very popular retail shopping area here in South Tulsa area, I would say. Now, we're talking about brick and mortar retail, and we're talking about 2003. This is the height of the Guitar Center expansion. Things had changed for them financially. You might want to reference the Company Man video down below to kind of go over what happened there. There was a huge investment towards expansion, and they really did put all their eggs in a brick and mortar retail expansion. This is why there's a Guitar Center in multiple places in every state. It's mostly because of this early 21st century huge expansion. And that's when eventually Tulsa would get theirs. I remember going into that place, maybe not the first time, but the first couple of times, because I'd heard about it. And, I remember feeling like, one, it was massive. It was overwhelmingly huge. I remember hearing like 20 guitars at the same time, all poorly played. One thing that the CEO says when he talks about it being like this a guitar playground, one thing that maybe he didn't consider and maybe Guitar Center didn't really give much thought to in the early stages is when you have all this gear that's readily available for people to play, they will play it. And they will play it and they will play it. And if you've ever been in a Guitar Center, when you see those floor models, some of those are pretty gnarly. I mean, some of those things have been played. They've already lived a lifetime of playing and they haven't even been sold yet. So what does that mean? Well, for Guitar Center, as of right now, as far as I know, they don't get any sort of floor model discount from the vendor. That's money they are automatically losing by putting that guitar out on the floor because they know most of the time, 99% of the time, they're not going to get a full retail price because those guitars look used. Even if they've never been owned, they look heavily used. So when the Guitar Center CEO talks about it needs to be more of that playground, while at the same time, by the way, talking about the need for Guitar Center to carry more expensive guitars, which I don't even know where to start with a comment like that. But the idea that it needs to become more of a playground, I don't know how that really helps Guitar Center in the long run. I think 20 years ago, it was great for the mentality of, hey, I still get to hold the guitar in my hands. I still get to check it out. I think a lot of that mentality has left, and Guitar Center didn't predict it at all. And even when it started happening, they did nothing at all. For years, they didn't have an app. They have an incredible selection of used gear, and they cannot figure out how to get it from one store to another in an efficient way that doesn't cost them an arm and a leg. They could not be any worse of a retail store right now. If you have ever walked into a Guitar Center, it's brutal. I mean, I have walked in to do research for these Let's Talk videos, and I will play 12 guitars. I was like, you know what? Maybe buy a set of strings. Let me buy something for the time. And honestly, I will end up putting the strings back and walking out the door because the line is so big. And most of it's because they got people who are looking to sell, people who have an issue with equipment, and there's like one register, two registers open. There are people who were waiting at the door when they open at 11 o'clock because I didn't know they opened at 11 a.m. And there were people with gear ready to sell. It's the Guitar-mageddon era, and Guitar Center is where people who don't really know much about gear, I got a guitar sitting around, maybe I can get some money for it, and so everyone's going to Guitar Center. The problem is the people who want to buy product have to sit behind the guy who needs to sell his PV Roadstar amp or whatever's going on. Trying to think of a good PV amp now. But you know what I'm saying. Maybe it's PV Raptor, right? But the issue here with Guitar Center, and is I understand why they need to take in used gear, but used gear and like, meanwhile, I'm trying to buy a set of strings. It shouldn't take me 30 minutes to buy that set of strings, right? And Guitar Center has to know that too. I think one thing that Guitar Center has to look at, and this is one thing the CEO said that really troubled me too, is he's like, there needs to be less of the $300 guitar in that store. And I don't know, that is where people are starting to call him a little out of touch, and I think that's a correct assumption. Guitar Center is not going to get better or sell more by selling more expensive gear. With Guitar Center, if you've been playing guitar for over a couple of years, I mean, unless they're just having a smoking deal, does Guitar Center still seem like a great place to go? It has somewhat alienated older players, but I don't know that it's doing a great job bringing in new players either. They're really stuck in a bad situation overall. The retail space in general is in a bad place overall. It's hard to get people to come into a retail location. If you really want to think about it, there has been two major failures for Guitar Center, and both of them have to do with economic issues. One is the recession in 08-09. They did nothing to offset that except for, I think they maybe started offering lessons and repair and all these warranties, which is where they make a tremendous amount of money, by the way. Warranting, special extended warranties and things like that. The other big failure is during COVID and their lack, again, to even remotely seem to bump up their web presence. Yes, they have an application finally. Yes, it's not terrible, But man, by the time you've got this all put together, think about all the foothold that Sweetwater and also Amazon. Let's not forget, I did a whole video on Amazon's best-selling guitars. And a lot of those guitars are guitars that Guitar Center are just never going to carry. It's never going to be their brand. And those are brands that don't really want to get carried in a Guitar Center, right? They're quite happy, I'm sure, with the relationship they've got with Amazon. So where does Guitar Center sit? Does the CEO have a point when he says that it needs to be more expensive guitars? You tell me, if you are looking to buy a Les Paul Custom, do you want to buy the one that's going to be new in box from a Sweetwater rep that's had a 55-point inspection? Yeah, it's going to be shipped, but here's the thing, the one that's been sitting in Guitar Center, how many hands have been touching that guitar? Because that was a big selling point for Sweetwater, is that there's a 55-point inspection. Look through Guitar Center's website. You got anything? You got any promise of, like, when you buy your guitar, we're going to take it out of a box, we're going to look at it? Because based on the guitars that they have out on the floor for their models, I don't think they're doing any of that. And here's the thing, I've had new students buy nice guitars from Guitar Center. New students. But once you've got 4 or 5 years of playing in, let me ask you this. A genie comes to you and offers you $5,000, but you must spend it on a guitar. You can buy any guitar you want, has to be $5,000 worth. You have to spend it all on guitar, and you can go anywhere you want. Would you go to Guitar Center? I know your answer is no. Why not? The answer is no, because you don't trust Guitar Center with that kind of money. Guitar Center isn't really ever going to be a place, I predict, where you're going to buy a really nice guitar, unless they're doing something exclusive, unless there's some special financing. That's it. That's the only thing that's going to draw you back into that store. And even that's kind of gone away. Guitar Center used to do all these exclusive runs with Gibson and Fender, and frankly, I'm not seeing it anymore. Now, if Guitar Center recovers from this, which I don't think they will, by the way. So part of this series that I'm going to do on this What Happened To is I'm going to make some predictions. And this video is not going to be any different. So I've got a couple of predictions for Guitar Center for 2025. We're going to do this video maybe every year. If they're still around in 2025, if I'm still around in 2025, physically and whatever YouTube-wise, we'll do this again. But here's the 3 predictions that I make, and I don't expect them to happen next year or even in 2 years, but here's 3 predictions that I'd like to make about Guitar Center, because in my head, the best analogy that you could make about Guitar Center right now is that they are Yahoo and Sweetwater is Google. And I don't see them ever coming back. Yahoo's never going to be the prominent search engine ever again. I don't think people even search Yahoo. Do they even have a search option? What do people use Yahoo for besides fantasy football, news, whatever else? Okay, Google is still here and very present in our lives. The issue that with Guitar Center is going to have is going to get back into our lives, into our space, the space where Sweetwater, and frankly, if we're going to be honest, a little bit of Amazon, a lot of Reverb. And it's a space they could have occupied. So let's talk about my 3 predictions. Okay, so prediction number 1. My prediction number 1 is going to be that their web presence is still going to be awful. I think they're running into the same issue that Sam Ash did, where they are slow to make any drastic changes. Part of that is because of who owns their company, and the people who own Guitar Center are not going to be making drastic changes anytime soon. Same people who own Guitar Center own Musician's Friend, and Musician's Friend doesn't seem to be lighting up the charts either. Again, slow to move, slow to react. They're a very slow company, and I think ultimately that's what was going to be their downfall. So their web presence is still going to be awful. Number 2, limited staff at stores. This staff that is there, I feel incredibly sorry for. So when I'm making fun or talking about Guitar Center in a negative light, I'm never talking about their management, their retail store employees, because God bless them, those people seem to really want to do the right thing, but unfortunately, I don't think they have the support. And I think that Guitar Center is not hiring. They are hiring a different type of person than they were 20 years ago. They just are. I mean, if you remember Guitar Center from 20 years ago, think about the people who helped you then and think about the people now. And that's no slam on the employees now. The other one I think is going to happen is I think they're going to start closing stores. When Sam Ash announced their closures earlier this year, Guitar Center is right behind them. They just can't keep operating like this. They owe a lot of their vendors millions of dollars. I can't, tell you how much or whoever. I just hear whispers that there's a bunch of money owed to a bunch of different people. They filed bankruptcy last year. I don't see them coming out of this. It's certainly not going to be as a premium guitar retailer. The problem is that when Guitar Center started having problems in 08, 09, kind of going into the teens, right? That's in Tulsa in particular is when I saw a lot more boutique, higher end guitar stores or stores that were in business before Guitar Center changing their business model in order to compete with Guitar Center. And they're still here and they're still thriving, by the way. Usually the story was going to be that Guitar Center was going to be the Walmart of guitars. They were going to run everybody out of town, which they almost did, and that they were going to be the kings of the hill. They were going to supply everybody. They were going to be the neighborhood music store. The problem is that they slipped. They weren't able to retain that high level. They lost and they got slow. And as a result, there are places here in Tulsa. Barnett Music Exchange opened in 2017. Okay. Now, granted, they sell orchestral instruments, school band stuff, but they sell a lot of guitars. They are a Suhr dealer. If you want a Suhr guitar, you go to Barnett Music Exchange. You don't go to Guitar Center. If you want a heritage guitar in Tulsa and you want a heritage dealer, you're going to go to Tulsa Guitar Company. That used to be Tulsa Band, by the way, but they've recently, the new owner has rebranded themselves and focused most of their sales on guitars, on guitar accessories. And he carries heritage and harmony in brands that you're not going to find, again, at Guitar Center. And nicer stuff. I mean, they do carry student gear too. But it's a whole different focus. It's a focus that Guitar Center's never going to have. They're just not. Not with the staff that they have, not with the retail space that they have, and not with this idea that it's a big playground. How many Guitar Centers are going to pull out the $4,000 Les Paul Custom for someone to mess with? You've been to a Guitar Center. You know where they keep those expensive guitars. This idea that there's all these people who are going to hold out from ordering guitars online, maybe pre-COVID, but COVID changed a lot of that. A lot of people buy really nice, the most expensive guitar I've ever bought, I bought online. It wasn't something I was interested in getting here locally. I'll be honest with you. I found a better deal online, so I went for it. If I'm going to spend some serious money on a guitar, I want everything that I want on it. And the chances of a local shop having it might not be so good. But on the other hand, if I want that customer service and I'm willing to pay a premium price for a Les Paul or a PRS or something really nice, again, I can't find a Guitar Center. I want the kind of service that's going to come from a company that's going to be really interested in selling to me and treating me like an individual. And Guitar Center is, for the most part, staffed by very young people. One way I think Guitar Center might be able to save themselves is on the accessory market. Pickups, strings, cables, being that like, I need something today. I can't wait for Amazon, or the local guy's too far down the street, or, they're going to have the lowest price, so I'll go to Guitar Center. I don't know that Guitar Center is going to be able to sell or move more guitars. When you go to a Guitar Center now, when I remember the last couple of times I went in there, it was hard just to find operating amps and gear. Everything just looks sort of neglected. These shops are severely understaffed. Everybody's just kind of running around all the time. Even if I had the money to walk in there, and like I said, I've put down product because I just didn't want to wait long enough to buy a set of strings. That's a problem for Guitar Center. When you have a customer with something literally in their hands and they're like, you know what, it's not even worth the wait to wait for the guy who's got to sell his Bogner amp or whatever, or he's upset that his PRS SC isn't playing like the way it did as he left the Guitar Center the day before, for whatever reasons going on there. So Guitar Center is just really up a creek without a paddle, in my opinion. Tell me what you think down in the comments. Am I way off? Is this ridiculous, all this stuff that I'm talking about? I hope you enjoy this new format. Let me know if you have some ideas about what kind of topics we could discuss for the What Happened To. I was thinking about like Dean guitars, full tone. There's just a lot to uncover. I don't want to make this a big history lesson, and I want to make it about as personal as as possible. But with Guitar Center, for me, it was never super personal. It wasn't a place I visited a ton. Around the same time Guitar Center came into town, we had a music go round that I frankly was a little closer, so I visited it a lot more, and I could get in and out of there a little easier. Frankly, Guitar Center for me has always been a little bit of a nightmare to buy from. The most expensive purchase I think I made was in 2004, 5-ish, 6-ish, whenever the ME50 came out from Boss. I bought an ME50 there with some graduation money from college. So I think that was about it. Well, that's it, folks. I'm going to wrap this thing up. I hope you enjoyed just some random thoughts going on about Guitar Center, kind of what I think, predictions. Am I off in my predictions? Do you think Guitar Center is going to weather the storm? Let me know down in the comments. And until next time, I appreciate it.